Hi, my love. Welcome back to another episode. This one I'm diving deep into what is Awaken the Dragon. And I'm so excited about this episode because I haven't been able to put this into words for years. And now I finally have some very tangible way of conveying this, which is quite new for me. So I feel like I'm probably going to either be very clumsy at explaining this or get too excited and go down too many side tangents, but I'm going to do my absolute best to try and convey what this is, because even though it sounds quite poetic and it's very evocative, underneath all of that is always the question that I'm asking myself and the question that I'm constantly asking working with my clients, because everything always comes down to this underlying thing that we know what we want. We know we want something much more than what we currently have. Like, we know that we're keeping ourselves very, very small in certain areas of our life. Maybe we're staying in a job that we just absolutely can't stand, but we've climbed the corporate ladder. Maybe we were staying in a specific career path, even though we know we would really love to actually be doing something else, but because we spent so much time and energy studying it, we don't want to change. Or maybe we're in relationships or friendships that really we outgrew a long time ago. Maybe you actually want to move abroad. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to, a lot of different things. There's a lot of different things that we genuinely want that for some reason, even though we know we want them, and you're in a good place if you know you want it, because at least you've admitted it to yourself at that point. Often we actually haven't admitted it to ourselves yet. So we just feel this underlying discontentment with our life because it's not what we want, but we're too scared to actually admit to ourselves or to really explore what we want, because then we have a responsibility to actually do something about it, which then always actually looks like changing our life and changing ourselves in order to be able to start walking down that path to what we actually want. So if you have admitted to yourself what you want, you're actually in a good place. We know we want these different things than what we've currently got. We know we've outgrown these small boxes that we put ourselves in, that society puts us in, that our family put us in growing up, that whatever they are. So why do we know all of those things? And we probably know a lot about the thing that we want to do. We've probably done all of the research to setting up your own business. We've probably read all of the books about attachment theory and all of these different things about relationships, but nothing's actually changing. We have all of this information. We're in this world of information, and I do this myself as well. We get into this thing of thinking that because we actually know a lot about something, that means that we actually are doing that thing. But really, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we have information about that thing, which is actually doesn't really even exist unless we're taking action on that thing. So we're in a position where we're overeducated about things. We're completely oversaturated by sometimes I scroll on my Instagram for less than 30 seconds now, and in 30 seconds I'm completely overwhelmed and bombarded by 100,000 different opinions about all of these different things, and I find it almost unbearable at this point. So we're in a situation where we have all of the information, we kind of know what we want to do, but it's extremely, extremely difficult to actually do that thing. And that is why my clients come to me ultimately, because they know that they want to book, the first backpacking trip that they've ever been on in their life, but they're terrified. They don't know that they can do that and be okay. They've never done it before. They want to quit their job and actually start the business that they want to do. They're in this very extremely high-paying corporate law job, but actually what they want to do is relocate to Europe and buy a beautiful property in France and start hosting wedding ceremonies. This is the kind of thing that I work with, and when we're in these situations, almost no one around us is that supportive of us doing that big of a plot twist in our life. Because then when we do these kinds of things, we really make other people confront the fact of why they also not following their dreams, or why they also not taking these kind of risks. So this is a whole other thing. I've recorded a lot of podcast episodes about this, but really this episode is about how then do we go from knowing what we want, which is one thing, to actually living what we want, which is a completely different thing altogether. And what it comes down to actually, and what Awaken the Dragon is a process of internal alchemy or inner alchemy. Because really, truly, our external world around us just reflects our internal state. So there's thousands and thousands of books on this. You can go and do lots of different reading and research of these things. Transurfing Reality is a really beautiful book on this, if you're interested in it. But that is just a fact. And we've all can think of different examples of this. When we are in a bad mood, we're just much more likely to notice all of the bad things around us. Our brain is going to, on purpose, find things that confirm what we're feeling, that validate our state of mind and our feeling, because our mind always wants to be validating us. And it just is true. Like, the more bad things you notice, the more bad things go wrong, the more like you get in that like negative spiral and you're going down. And the opposite is also true. When we create a very pleasant internal state where we are very peaceful and calm and loving, and we expect the best of things and we look for the best of things, of course we find those things. And every ancient text, every ancient philosophy talks about this. So and also we talk about this a lot in Kalari because it is based on principles of Tantra, but it's also in like ancient Taoism, it's also in ancient Egyptian culture, it's in a lot of ancient cultures where there's this thing of like the microcosm and the macrocosm. So the macrocosm is the universe, the external world as we know it, and nature, and the microcosm is us, and we are in our own entirety as a human being a reflection of the outside, and the outside is a reflection of our inside, and the microcosm and the macrocosm are always reflecting one another uniquely to us. So what does that mean for us? Like you might be thinking like, yes, so what, But the thing is that we spend a lot of time trying to brute force change the outside world around us, often not very successfully, because it costs an enormous amount of energy, and actually the things around us are not always that easy to change. Like, it's very difficult to change other people and probably not worth your time or effort. It's very difficult to like change an entire conglomeration, if it's your entire workplace of your job or your entire like city that you're living in, or these kind of things. And instead of trying to actually really put so much effort into changing the things outside of us and resisting a lot of the things outside of us, we can put all of that energy and effort into transforming our own inner world, which is the process of inner alchemy. It's the process of understanding this microcosm, and then through understanding the microcosm, influencing our experience of the macrocosm. So that all sounds very, very poetic. You can do a lot of different reading about that. It's in a lot of different cultures. We talk about this like often. Guruji is talking about this in after trainings. I'm reading books about it at the moment in terms of like Taoism and in Neigong specifically. Also exploring Qigong and a lot of things in that way. But when it comes to actually applying this in our life, I really went through these things in the last podcast episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, you can go and listen to that one. It will help you understand more. But I'll just briefly recap here what I spoke about then, which is that we have these energy centers in our body, and they have a natural polarity, which in modern society is reversed. And we live out this constriction of the reversed polarity. When we are in our natural polarity, the correct one, we are in a state of like natural magnetism. We are in a state of connection to the macrocosm, if you want to say that. We are in a state of connection with nature, and nature is very rhythmic. And when we are in that flow, our life flows very, very coherently, very harmoniously. When we're out of that rhythm, which most of us unfortunately are, just because that's the way that modern society works, and modern society thrives with us actually being out of this natural polarity, then we end up in situations where life becomes very, very difficult. We don't trust ourselves. We end up stuck in these like modern society normal things, like the white picket fence, the 9 to 5, the climbing the corporate ladder, the, getting married and having kids, like saving for your retirement, just waiting your whole life until you're retired to actually do any of the things that you want to do. Like all of these things that now we're really cottoning on that they aren't for everybody. Most people don't actually want a lot of those things. So when we think about that, then we get into this position where then we ask ourselves, how do we return to our natural state of polarity? So just to recap, the three main energy centers, and of course there are many, many, many more, but the three main ones that are very consistent across a lot of different ancient cultures are that there is one in our head, one in our heart, and one in our lower abdomen. That one is called like the lower dantian or the hara or the womb space. It has different names. They're also called the upper, middle, and lower dantian. They're correspondent with different chakras, the ajna, the heart, and the sacral and root chakras. There's a lot of different language around these things. You can choose which language works for you. Even on a very physiological level, they also just correspond with huge nerve plexus in our body that have their own sources of wisdom, although this is far also more subtle than just the physical level. So the natural polarity of those is for the head center to be something very, very, very light, very full of consciousness, full of creativity, full of creative thinking. The heart center is designed to be enormously openly expanded. It's a huge, huge electromagnetic field when it is properly open. And our lower abdomen center, our hara, is supposed to have density. It's supposed to have gravity there. In like Rosicrucian philosophy, these centers can be called like thinking, feeling, and willing. And it is true, like even if you think about how they refer to them in the chakra system, for example, in yoga, like the lower abdomen center is our force of like primal life force energy. And it's also our source of groundedness and centeredness in our own self, which allows us to trust in ourselves and trust in life, trust that life is a beautiful place that supports us, and feel completely rooted and grounded, not easily shaken. And it also is a place where it is our force of will. It is our ability to actually do things in our life, to actually follow through on things, to commit to something and actually follow through on that commitment. When those are in the correct polarity with lightness above and density below, gravity below, they pull apart and create this enormous, open, expanded center in our heart, which creates a natural, extraordinary magnetism in our life and allows us to live a genuinely open-hearted way. When they are reversed, which is what most of us have, the head center is extremely dense and heavy. And we've gone so far away from like light and consciousness. We're in like cycles of rumination and just storytelling, repeating the same old stories and worrying and being anxious and depressed and like having a lot of density in our head. And we are almost completely disconnected from our hara, from our lower dantian. We have very little will, a lot of us. We have very little connectedness to ourselves and to life. We have very little stability in that place or anchoring in that place. We're very easily thrown off by lots of different things happening in our lives. And when when the top is heavy and the bottom is light, they converge and completely compress and constrict our heart space. And then no matter how much you try and live an open-hearted magnetic life, you won't be able to, because the heart doesn't have space to expand. It needs space. So when we live in that way with this reversed polarity, we end up living from a place of force. We end up living from our head center. And I talk about this a lot more in the last episode, so you can go and listen to that if you want more, so I don't get carried away here. But we live from a place of force, which again is this thing of like trying to force the external world to look differently, to behave differently, to suit us. What actually is the correct way to exert power in the world, because we are inherently very, very, very powerful. We have very powerful creative energy within us. We want that source of power to come from our belly, from our lower abdomen, from our hara. And when the power comes from there, it is like genuine power. It is flow instead of force. It is rhythm rather than like tension. So I want to keep talking about these things, but I also want to make sure that I cover everything here. So we want to make sure when we have those things in the correct polarity, that we are able to live from this place of grounded power, which then brings me all the way back to this thing of Awaken the Dragon. So dragon is actually one of the forms of Shaolin Kung Fu, dragon form. It's also so exactly Kalari. I feel like those things, like Dragon Kung Fu and Kalari, are very, very similar in a lot of ways. And also just in essence, like when I first came to Orville, when I first came to Kalari Ground and first did my first 1 month intensive training in Kalari, I couldn't stop thinking about this dragon tattoo. I actually got it immediately after that trip on the back of my arm here, this Chinese dragon. I don't and it doesn't even make sense why I would get a Chinese dragon, because I'm in India. It's an ancient Indian sword fighting martial art. And there aren't really, as far as I know, any dragons in Indian mythology. But I had this constantly in my mind and in my dreams. And so the thing of dragon as a martial art form is this practice of learning how to go into intensity without becoming tense. And it's something where we discover within us, and actually it doesn't look that impressive most of the time, because the practice itself is building and coiling and stacking this very, very, very enormous, what's the right word, like, it's like when you hold a spring and you squeeze it, you compress it down, and it's full of this like coiled, latent potential energy that is stored, because when it's not stored, it runs through your system and it creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of like restlessness and being overly charged. So when we create this like tensile strength within us, within ourselves, and it comes from repeating these extremely grounded movements where we're interacting with the ground, where we're very low to the ground, where we're going out and striking and coming back in very low lunges, where we're like coiling inwards and then coming outwards. Like there's a lot of like twisting motion of the spine, a lot of like very dynamic movements of the arms, striking of the arms. What we're learning and building in that specific martial art itself is this process of articulating the spine so much, as you can imagine, as a dragon. Like it is just like coils upon coils upon coils with these claws. They're very like serpent-like, but with claws. And so that is really the recipe for being able to correct, in a lot of ways, this polarity, this reverse polarity of our three power centers in our body. Because the one thing connecting all of those areas is our spine. And, you know, in yoga, it's called the Sushumna Nadi, and it has the Ida and Pingala on either side, the moon and the sun. In Taoism, it also has different names, but it refers to the same central channel with, again, the sun and the moon on either side. In ancient Egyptian philosophy, it's also there with different language. All of those also with like this symbology of these serpents coiling around each other and meeting at the top. Which then brings me to the next point here, which is that when we know, circling back to the start, that we want more for our life, that we don't want to stay in these small situations, when we genuinely know that we could be living much, much, much more extraordinary things in our life, we all have a sense that there is this kind of latent force inside of us that we maybe have had glimpses of in certain moments of our life, in very euphoric moments, in moments where we've really like gone out of our comfort zone and experienced something extraordinary about ourselves, in moments with a lot of adrenaline, with moments where we've had these very, very, very intense experiences. We understand that actually there is sources of energy within us that we can tap into that are far beyond just this normal physical, like flesh and bones body that we understand. So again, all of these ancient cultures, ancient ways of understanding this have their own versions of these things, a different language for them. Like in Kalari, for example, they use a lot the words of Kundalini and Prana, which are two different but entwined forces within the body. In Qigong and Taoism, they refer to them as Jing and Qi or Qi, and Shen, three different types of energy interacting within that system, each with their own, you know, link to different parts of our subtle bodies. In ancient, like Tibetan culture, there's something called Tumo, I think it's called. But there are all these things of like, basically in principle, our breath and our awareness interacting inside of our body system to then awaken this force that is within all of us. And a lot of the like mythology, or a lot of the understanding of this is that this is an energy that's stored at the base of our spine, and we go and we awaken it using different practices and build a lot of like strength and power there, and then in a very intentional and safe way raise that energy up to our head centers. And basically for the purpose of evolution, or for the purpose of enlightenment, for the purpose of becoming one with the Tao again, like becoming one with all of consciousness. So that's probably a bit out of my scope of practice as a coach. I'm definitely still on this journey myself, and I think we all are on this journey. It's an entire lifetime journey, like as Guruji always is telling us. He was saying yesterday, like, yeah, you guys are doing this 2-year diploma, you're training all of this 5 hours a day, but honestly, once your diploma ends, that's when you actually start. Like, that's the beginning. This is barely even the frame, this is barely even the foundation. So to tie all of these things together, because I'm sure you're thinking like, what are you talking about? You've got a lot of things in the mix here. The real opponent was never outside of us. It's not out there. It's not the external world. The enemy is not the external world. And we are not going to be able to fight with the external world to be able to change it into what we want so that we can have what we want. The actual enemy really is inside our microcosm. And the enemy is genuinely our own self, because we are in battle with our self, and mainly our mind, because we are so obsessed with identifying with our mind, that the enemy is creating an internal state through this process of internal alchemy that allows us to transform, as in alchemy, to transform lead into gold, to transform what is happening on the inside, so that it cannot be otherwise than this, reflected outside of us. And the opponent I see in myself and in my clients is like our very extremely stiff spine from sitting down all day. We don't breathe. We breathe like here, into our chest, like nowhere down into our abdomen. We have extremely heavy, dense minds. They were never meant to be that dense. Our mind was never meant to carry the weight of our whole identity. We are terrified of change. We are terrified of the unknown. We are terrified of uncertainty, which keeps us stuck in these small places. We feel disconnected from nature. We feel disconnected from life. We don't feel supported by these things. And so we are desperately in this place where we are not grounded and safe within our own self. We are desperately trying to just, and often subconsciously, cling on to any kind of safety around us that makes us feel safe in our life. And this, unfortunately, does look exactly like staying in all of these small situations that you know you've outgrown, because they feel safe, they feel familiar, they feel like, at least I know, it's like the quote of like, better the poison you know than the one you don't, or something like that. Better the enemy you know than the enemy you don't. So although we can rationally understand that we want to change things about our life, as long as we are terrified of the unknown, we won't ever actually really be able to do that work, unless of course you get support, unless, like, this is the work I do with my clients, because it is a thing of also mirroring nervous systems, right? Like, if you want to do things in your life that you've not done before, it's an extremely good idea to get support and guidance from somebody who has done those things, who has moved abroad with nothing and started multiple different lives in different parts of the world, who has left the corporate 9-to-5 and started their own successful business, who has done like whatever, who's completely transformed their body and their energy levels, who has all of these things, because it is a process of becoming more like the people that we spend time with. That is just something that naturally happens. We can't deny that fact, and we can't try and avoid that fact, because it is true. So when we then accept full responsibility for the fact of our internal world and our internal landscape and our internal ability to be with ourselves, then we get to really explore something extremely, extremely beautiful, because we finally, for the very first time, come back home to our own power and understand that we are an incredibly powerful creative being. Because as long as we are going out there to try and change the things outside of us, we are outsourcing all of our power. All we're saying every time we do that is, this thing is changing me, not I am changing myself, or I am changing the world around me, which leaves us complete victims of everything around us. And it's an extremely disempowering way to live. So when we finally accept this power and responsibility, which is often uncomfortable, because often the things outside of us are uncomfortable, we don't want to have to admit that we are really, like, on many different levels creating those things. It's a very confronting thing to have to admit to yourself. So, but it is extremely, extremely, extremely empowering, because then actually you get to change your internal world, which is literally exactly the process of Kalari. It's showing up to practice every single day, day in, day out, 5 hours a day, doing the same postures over and over and over and over and over again. Because what it is doing is changing myself on this microcosmic level. It's forcing me into discomfort. Minute over minute over minute over month over month over month over month over, I think it's been 150 or 170 days consecutively of practice, not one single day off, not one single training session off. So what that does is it trains you, me, and I'm not saying Kalari is the only way to do it, actually, that I want to be clear about that. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I do think that the ancient practices of yoga, especially Ashtanga yoga, and any martial art, really, like any of these ancient martial arts, will also do the same thing. They are also creating this process of internal alchemy within you. But what they do is they force you into a state of discomfort and force you to breathe in that place and have awareness in that place, which is the two key ingredients for any kind of internal transformation, any kind of internal alchemy, which is then going to be the thing that re-establishes this correct polarity of these energy systems in our body, which then is going to, without fail, completely change the world around you and the opportunities that come into your life, the people that come into your life. So then the process of that is just to repeatedly put yourself in this position of discomfort. Go into this, like in Kalari, we have they're called two different things, the first basic Chubada, which is just like a horse stance in Kung Fu, basically. Like legs shoulder width apart, down, like in a very low, deep squat with your spine horizontal to the ground. And you go into it and you hold it. And there's also the first animal posture in Kalari is elephant posture, and it's the same thing, like this very low, deep squat with your hands in front of you like this, and you hold it. And you hold it, and sometimes you hold your breath there to like create this kind of a vacuum inside of your body, and sometimes you breathe there, and it's a process of being able to breathe into this discomfort, which the more you do that, the more you can stay in this extremely uncomfortable posture, the more you can not flinch. I'm so convinced that Kalari is a thing of not flinching, like not flinching when you're hitting sticks in front of your face, like millimeters away from your eyes, when you're like swinging these giant bamboo canes at each other, when you're in the pit and like everyone is sweating, and some people sweat so much in those classes. And sometimes like you do a jump kick and the person in front of you just like sprays like a sheet of sweat onto you, into your face, and it's just like a process of just don't flinch, like just, you get cuts in your feet constantly, like people hit you with the sticks in the hands constantly, and it's like, just don't flinch, keep going. You have to keep going. It's going to happen. You are going to get hurt. You're going to get uncomfortable. You get someone else's sweat in your mouth, and like you just have to get on with it. And the more you train yourself, the more you put your nervous system in this state and you stay there and you breathe, you get to create this thing which is awakening the dragon, which is exactly this coiled, very, very extremely strong tensile power within you, which then allows you to be relaxed in your life. Like if you watch professional martial artists go to fight against each other, they don't look that stressed. Their bodies are relaxed. Their bodies are like that when and it's not a thing of like relaxation means no effort. It can mean extraordinary effort. But it's effort coming from a different place. It's not coming from force from your mind. It's not coming from force from your muscles. It's coming from this incredible power of flow and like primal strength. So awakening the dragon is getting back in touch and awakening this energy force within you and training it to be able to hold pressure under pressure. Because that's how you then get to change your life genuinely. Because it means that you can go into any situation in your life and know you're going to be completely fine. You can end a relationship that isn't serving you more, even though it's going to be sad, and even though you still love that person, because you know that there are beautiful things in this life waiting for you, and you're prepared to go out there and just be okay with uncertainty and not know if and when you will meet the next person. You can leave the job not knowing necessarily what you're going to do. You can book a one-way flight not knowing. Because even all of the certainty, quote unquote, we have in our life is completely contrived anyway. None of it is actually genuinely certain. We just like to think that it is because it makes us feel good. So awakening the dragon is this process of inner alchemy, of going inside of you and transforming all of these things. Like in Kalari, you go into the pit and you face your demons every single day. And there are a lot of demons in there, you know, there are a lot of excuses. There are a lot of like very, very, very destructive emotions in there. There's a lot of anger hidden in all of us. There's a lot of rage. There's a lot of grief hidden in there. There's a lot of jealousies and resentments. There's a lot of envy. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of like weird things inside all of us. And it's this process of like going in, and as Guruji always says, we're like purifying those things. We're cleansing those channels physically and energetically with this force of our awareness and our breath, so that we become a clear enough vessel to be able to hold this incredibly potent life force energy when we awaken it, because it's extremely strong and you need a strong body to be able to hold that energy safely. So I hope that this makes any kind of sense. I'm going to be recording a lot more podcast episodes about this. This is really just my very first attempt at actually putting all of this into words in a tangible, meaningful way, in the way that I've been exploring it within my own self and with my clients. I genuinely hope that you go away and think about these things in your own self. Like try and connect to these different energy centers within yourself. Try and see if you can feel your force of will in your lower abdomen. See if you can breathe there. See if you can feel whether your heart is constricted or not by this polarity, or whether it feels open, whether it feels naturally magnetic. Think about how you are in situations where things are uncertain and tense. Can you stay relaxed in those moments? Because everything in your life will transform when you can. That's the thing. That is the golden secret of all of life. How can you learn to be relaxed even when everything around you is chaos? Because then you get to be the person that has extraordinary creative power in their life to honestly like unprecedented levels. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I am going to be sharing a lot more about this. If you're curious about how this would actually apply to you in your own life, or you know that you're out of polarity and you want to get guidance on how to get back in there, send me a message. I have an application form in my bio in Instagram. If you want to apply for my private mentorship, go and do that, and we can have a chat and see if we're a good fit. This is my biggest passion, all of this work. So here's to our dragon awakenings for all of us, and I hope you have a beautiful time exploring this as much as I am. Love you guys.